So it's like,
Yeah.
I think it's just like a bullshit story we tell ourselves, like, oh, I need to be inspired to write. So, no, you don't.
Right.
Just start writing. You'll probably be inspired once you sit down to write. So I think we get kind of inspiration in the wrong order.
Mhm.
We think that we need to be inspired to write, and I think that you need to write to be inspired.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Right Stuff. I'm Corey Gwynn, the creator of Blurt. This interview is with Paul Jarvis. It was from October 30th of this year. Paul is an amazing designer, podcaster, course creator, software creator, but he's also an amazing writer. He's got a great newsletter about bootstrapping and creative arts. And I was very grateful that he agreed to spend some time to chat about his writing process. He's got a great new book coming out called Company of One. So we talk a little bit about his book, and then we also talk a lot about how he writes and why he does it and how he gets it done. It's a great talk. Enjoy. Hey everyone, I'm here today with Paul Jarvis, who is a man of many talents, made a lot of things on the internet over the years, and I'm pretty excited to talk to him today because he's also an amazing writer. So Paul, thanks for joining us here today. First off, I know Company of One is this new book. You've got a lot of momentum kind of going about this. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about what Company of One is going to be about?
Yeah, so the book is just really the idea that we can question growth in business. And it's more than that, because it's, I think, 272 pages or something like that. But it kind of goes through all of the things that would happen if we questioned if growth was a byproduct of success in business. So you do well in business and you grow. That's pretty much what everybody says, what everybody tells you. Says that all over like TechCrunch or Gary Vaynerchuk's Instagram feed.
Right.
And my thought has always been, but why? What if we don't want to grow? What if we like where our business is at? What if there is such a thing in business in this capitalist world that's enough?
Right.
What if we have enough? Like, obviously, a lot of times, and pretty much every time when we're starting out, we need to build to enough. But a lot of times we don't change anything about our business when we reach it.
Right.
We may have the MRR we want for like our SaaS product or something like that, where it's sustainable for us, it's sustainable for our clients or our customers, it's sustainable to like save money, pay our mortgage, all of that. And growing wouldn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense if we don't want the added stresses or the added responsibilities, or even if we don't want our lives to change. Because I think that people who do well tend to get promoted out of the jobs that they like. So they tend to go from like the maker to the manager. And that's cool for some people, but it's definitely not cool for all of the people. I know for myself, I'm an awful manager. I'm really good at making stuff. I'm not really good at telling other people to make stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the point of the book.
Awesome. And I mean, I guess you can kind of sense that there's been a little bit of a movement in that in recent days of like, more, there's like more makers, like it's actually become a term, and people are trying to establish themselves as, building products. How did this idea come to you of this book? Like we're sensing there's kind of this movement, but when did you have this concept of this book?
Yeah, I think I had the concept. I think not. I had the concept, but not as a book in the 90s when I started.
Wow. Okay.
But it didn't really turn into, and it was just something that I was always aware of. And it was just always like, but why? Because everybody would be, because in the beginning I was a web designer and I was always full of booked up with clients, and I had a long waiting list, and people were always like, hey, Paul, why don't you just like hire a couple more designers, hire a developer, hire a project manager.
Yeah.
And it's like, but why? I don't want to manage people doing the work that I want to do. I just want to do that work.
Yeah.
But I think the catalyst for the book was probably about 7 or 8 years ago now. I lived in a tiny surf town with my wife called Tofino in British Columbia, Canada. And I was out surfing with my buddy, who's this South African freelance accountant. And we were like sitting in the lineup waiting for waves, and we were talking as we usually do. And he was like, well, buddy, because every sentence is buddy for him. Anyways, not really important in the story, Paul. But he was like, well, and it was probably September, October. And he was like, well, buddy, I've made enough. So I think I'm just going to go rock climbing for the rest of the year. And then he takes off on a wave. And I'm sitting there like, what did you just say?
Yeah.
And then he paddles back around and we start talking about it more. And he's like, well, I know what enough is for me. I know that
That's awesome.
I can like pay my mortgage, my car. I have enough money to put in the bank for savings.
Mm-hmm.
I have enough money to travel. So why would I work more when I have what I need?
Yeah.
And I was like, that's kind of what I've been like. I haven't been thinking. This is what I've been doing, but not what I've been thinking about. And
Yeah.
then from there, it just kind of, I started to write about it because I thought I was like the one person who was challenging growth. Then I started to write about it, and people started to be like, "Hey, I'm I'm the same. Like I
Yeah.
feel the same way about growth." And I thought I was the only one. And then when I got like, I don't know, hundreds, maybe 1,000 people telling me this, it's like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of us. Like it's the worst pun ever, but there's like this growing, like you said, there's this growing movement of people who have businesses that don't necessarily want to grow them beyond what they need.
Right. They
And
know
I
what
was
they
like,
need. Yeah.
that's a book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what's interesting, I find interesting, is it's kind of been inside of you all this time anyways, like the notions of this book.
Yeah, totally.
When did you really kind of start to write? Like, how did you know? I mean, obviously, I know you've self-published a few books. Like, do you consider yourself a writer from the beginning?
Um, not definitely not from the beginning. I've
Hmm.
been writing since I could write, but it's probably I don't think I considered myself a writer till I wrote my first book. And before I wrote my first book, I was the story in my head, which was ridiculous, but it was like, well, I can't be a writer because I'm not a writer. And I was like, hey, wait a second, me. If all it takes to be a writer is writing, why don't I just start writing?
Right.
Like it seems so silly, but
Yeah.
that's what I did. And yeah, this book, like I'm a lazy writer, so the way that I write is I get sick of people asking me the same thing, like in one-on-one conversations or over emails, and
Hmm.
I'm like, this I'm going to write a book, so then I have to write this one time and I can answer the question indefinitely without having to write emails about the same thing over and over and over again. So I'm like, okay, this has to be a book because I don't want to keep doing this because I'm lazy and I only want to do the work one time and then share it with everybody as they need it or as they ask for it.
Hmm. Hmm. So, so for you, it seems like it comes pretty natural. Like in your, like you like, so that's an example of like answering people's questions. But I do find that your point of view is like kind of atypical, I would almost say, in a fresh, like from a fresh point of view. Like, how do you push yourself to have that fresh perspective? Like, where does that inspiration come from?
Um, I think it's that I inherently have that like kind of counterintuitive perspective. Like I'm just a
Mhm.
weird guy. But I think the way that it kind of works in my writing is that I think a lot of us have like a unique perspective, at least with the things we really care about, or we have some challenging ideas. And I think that the importance for writers is to not be scared of that, like, or to be scared of it and act on it anyways. Like, I
Mhm.
know that in talking about certain subjects that are not popular opinions, people are going to probably be unhappy with me. And I can be afraid to share those opinions, but I'm probably going to do them anyways because that's what works for me. And I
Mhm.
find that the more I share, and it's silly, right? Because it's like it's hard to share who you actually are in writing, but I think that's the most important part of writing. And I think that's any writer's job, especially in nonfiction. I think in fiction too a bit, but I
Yeah.
don't really know nonfiction.
Mhm.
It's to share who you truly are and to make that sharing honest and engaging,
Mhm.
right? And I think that it's scary to do that, especially on the internet. It's scary to do that because everybody has an opinion. Everybody's going to immediately tell you why you're
Yeah.
wrong about whatever it is that you believe. And it's up to you to hold true to your beliefs or to be able to learn and be like, okay, that belief that I thought I held, I don't did. Somebody made a valid point. Like there's a lot of time people are always like, well, you changed
Mhm.
your mind about this. I'm like, it's part of being
That's
a
healthy.
human. Like
Yeah.
I can change my mind about things if
Mhm.
somebody presents better information
Yeah.
for a different opinion. And I'm like, good, now I have that opinion.
Yeah.
I'll be fluid here. And I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think yeah. And I guess for entrepreneurship too, I guess that's why a lot of entrepreneurs write, because it's a quick way to kind of get your idea out there, I suppose. And it's a way to kind of hold you honest, shape your ideas, also get feedback about what you're putting out there, and give yourself a voice, I guess, that people latch onto. So, and clearly it's done well for you. I mean, I know now. So you write not only like you self publish some books. I know you have a newsletter that you also write for. Um, what does writing do for you personally? Like, is it like, do you actually do it because you enjoy it now?
Yeah, I mean, I think writing for me is kind of love hate,
Hmm.
where I do like the act of writing because I feel like writing really helps me figure out how I feel and think about certain topics. Like I find if I'm not really sure about something and I start writing about it, I'll get a better sense of kind of where I fall
Hmm.
on that subject. But I also like it's still hard. Like I'll sit here by myself in my office writing and like be sweating because like it's nervous. Like it's a weird thing to like right
Hmm.
and because I know, and it's hard because like at this point now I know that the things that I write publicly are going to be consumed by a lot of people,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is a double-edged sword. Like obviously I think it's good, it's cool that people pay attention to what I have to say, but I also feel that I really have to separate that because I don't want it to skew how I write. Like I don't want my writing to get watered down because I know that like my view on this is going to like piss a lot of people off
Right.
or make people like dislike me or unsubscribe from my newsletter or something. And I feel that I really have to work at this point to be present and in how I'm writing about how I actually feel about something
Hmm.
because it's difficult because I know like sometimes when I write things like I know it's going to piss people off and it's like, but this is how I actually feel. This is a topic I feel is important. And I think a lot about outcomes with my writing as well,
Hmm.
where it's like, well, if somebody follows the advice that I write, is anything good or bad going to happen? If somebody thinks that what I've written is bad and they challenge that, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Hmm.
So I'm always kind of thinking both in terms of like what the outcome is, but also I don't want the fact that I know a lot of people are going to read the things that I write to affect the way that I write because I want to keep writing as me. And I think that's why
Yeah.
a lot of people like my writing is because it's just like I'm not smart enough to write like a different person. I can only write like me, but I also don't want it to be like
Yeah.
watered down or anything.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's probably why I sweat so much when I write.
That's awesome. No, it's good. I think it's a good lesson. I never really noticed that, I guess, until talking to you now, the importance of it from like an entrepreneurial perspective because of that. Like you have to kind of put yourself, I mean, even when you build products, like I feel like that's such a barrier for a lot of entrepreneurs is like launching the thing. Like you have so much fear about what people are going to think, or you fear failing or something. But writing can be a very honest way to kind of push yourself personally to kind of get out there with your ideas. Especially if you have a unique perspective, you'll never know unless you put it out there first. So, do you struggle with writer's block at all? Is that like a thing to you?
No, I
Yeah.
think it's funny because I think it was Seth Godin who was like, people don't have talker's block.
Yeah. I
So
love
like,
that.
why is why is writer's block a thing? And I'm like,
Yeah.
that kind of makes sense. And the way that I kind of approach like I really think of writing as work for me because writing is what pays the bills.
I see.
So
Hmm.
it's like an accountant isn't going to sit down and be like uninspired to like run. I don't know what accountants actually do, like run numbers in a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I don't actually know, bad analogy, but like most people in their jobs just go and they sit down and they
Hmm.
get to work.
Hmm.
And I think that a lot of times in like creative pursuits, we treat it differently. And
Yeah.
I think it's a shame. Like I don't sit down to write when I feel like writing because I probably would never write if that
Hmm.
was the case.
Hmm.
I just know that, hey, I got to write an article this week for my newsletter. I probably have to write for a couple publications. I've got to write probably 10 pages of sales or marketing content for something, for some product. And it's like, that's just my job. Like it's on my to-do list. So I just sit down and I start.
Mhm.
And what I found as well is that when I sit down and write, if I feel like I don't even feel like writing, I don't know why I'm doing it. And like 10 minutes go by and I'm like just in the zone, like just type, 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 type. So it's like,
Yeah.
I think it's just like a bullshit story we tell ourselves, like, oh, I need to be inspired to write. So, no, you don't.
Right.
Just start writing. You'll probably be inspired once you sit down and write. So I think we get kind of inspiration in the wrong order.
Mhm.
We think that we need to be inspired to write. And I think that you need to write to be inspired.
Wow. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Do you, so it's, like, you know that you need to write now, but like describe like a week for you then, or like a day. Like, do you have like a regular routine or a habit for your writing? Do you write there in your office, or is it just like, it's just something that obviously, I mean, I can't imagine, I'm learning this now, like having gone out on my own, like you have to kind of build your own routines. And writing, like you're saying, you can make it more of a job. Is it something you schedule into your time, or how do how do you get it done?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have any daily routines other than coffee because
Yeah.
that's required.
Okay.
But like every single day is so dramatically different for me because like I'm an author, writer, I have software products, I host podcasts, I
Hmm.
do online courses, all sorts of other things. So every day is kind of different. But yeah, like I know that I need, so two things for my writing, for my routine writing, my Sunday Dispatches newsletter. I know that I need an article a week, and I know that I'm less stressed out if I'm ahead of my schedule by at least 4 to 6 weeks.
Hmm.
So I know that if I'm at about the 4 week mark where I've written 4 articles in advance and I don't have a fifth article, I'm going to sit down and write probably 2 or 3 articles. I find I can write articles faster if I write a bunch one after another. So I'll take like 2 hours, and one article will take an hour, and then the next three will take 20 minutes.
Huh.
So I'll just be able to like bang out another month. But there's no like, yeah, there's no routine. Like there's no, I get up at the same time and I start writing, and
Mhm.
like I read about like authors like Haruki Murakami or Stephen King who just have these like insane careers of just pumping out amazing content. And they have, even Maya Angelou had like, she rented a hotel room with just like a notepad and paper, and she would try to get her writing done before 3 o'clock so she could go home and have dinner with her husband.
Mhm.
And like, all Haruki Murakami, I think, wakes up at 4 in the morning, goes for like hours of swimming, and then writes and then finishes his day. And I'm like, routine seems great for some people.
Mhm.
I just know that I'm not good at that. Like I'm not, that's why I work for myself, because I don't really want a routine. Like I don't have an alarm clock. I don't do anything at the same time every day,
Mhm.
not even eating. So I just kind of write where it makes sense, but I do schedule it where I
Yeah.
know that if I have articles that need to get written or I have deadlines from a publisher, it's going on my calendar. Like it's going on my calendar and my to-do list, where I'll have a to-do list of 2 or 3 things to do every day. If it's an article, then that'll be top of the list. If that's the most important thing, I do that first. Could be at 9 a.m., could be at 6 a.m., could be at like 1 in the afternoon.
Mhm.
There's no, yeah,
Okay. But
there's no
having
schedule.
that deadline kind of helps you too. And I think
Yeah.
it's incredibly respectful too to have this like ahead of schedule mindset. That's interesting too, because I think a lot of us are pretty guilty of like procrastination as being the
It makes
driver.
me less, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just makes me less stressed. Like I don't like to write from a place of stress.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's hard.
Mhm.
So I would rather be ahead of my, even with my book, I think the first draft of my book was due in January of like traditional publishing is so slow.
Mhm.
So I think the first draft was due last January, and I wrote it I think 5 months before it was due, and I gave it to my editor, and he was like, "What?" Like I needed to get, like I just needed to get this done and off my plate and ahead of schedule.
Wow.
And he's like, "That's awesome," but I don't think that happens very often. But still, like I don't want to write from a place of stress.
Yeah.
So
That's a
I want
healthy
to get things
perspective.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. Do you is there anything you would tell aspiring writers as far as like just to get them going? What should they be striving to do in their writing?
Yeah, I think to practice makes perfect. It's
Mm.
funny, like to be a good musician, like it's assumed that you have to spend hundreds of or thousands of hours like practicing and learning and practicing before you can like get on stage and play music. But with writing, it's like people beat themselves up when they're not a good writer like first try.
Mm-hmm.
Even with articles that I write, I typically have 3 or 4 drafts of the article. I know my first draft is going to be utter garbage. I'm going to get all the ideas down at least, and then I'm going to go back and retool it and make it sound better, make it sound like me, make it just good. And then, yeah, it's just like iteration is such an important thing, and writers just beat themselves up so hard about it, about like having a shitty first draft where like everybody kind of has a shitty first draft.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's the way that it works. So getting things down, getting your ideas down first as often as possible is just so important
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to get better as you practice, as you work at it, as you iterate, as you like edit. And I'm even a bad editor. And the other thing is that like I suck at the mechanics of writing or the technical aspect of writing, but like I pay a copy editor to fix all of my typos and bad sentence choices.
Mm-hmm.
There is not even that expensive to do. And it's like, I don't need to concern myself. And this makes so many writers mad, but like, I don't need to concern myself with the mechanics of writing. Like my job as a writer is to get ideas down in a clear and engaging way.
Mm.
If I'm missing some grammar stuff or sentence structure stuff, that's somebody else's job.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, no, that's powerful.
that's not my job.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not my job as a writer. That's if your job is an editor or a copy editor, then you don't need to concern yourself with getting ideas down in a clear and engaging way.
Mm-hmm.
You can help others do that by fixing their sentences and grammar.
Yeah.
Right. So I
That's
feel
huge.
like we take on too much as writers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we just take on too much and try to make everything work as quickly as possible when it doesn't have to be the case.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've seen a lot of amazing writers too who just write kind of conversationally. Like they're, they put in all these emojis or whatever, and it, when you look at it, you're like, "What is this?" But then when you read it, it's it's engaging, and their ideas are there, and you feel that like personal connection. So there's something to just being more about ideas. I guess it's really powerful.
Yeah.
So when is your book coming out, Company of One? I'm pretty excited about reading this thing, and I know you've got a podcast. Can you share some, like, where are we going to find this? How do we stay tuned to when it's going to be out?
Yeah, so Company of One comes out January 15th, 2019. It'll be available in hopefully every bookstore, at least around North America. It's available online. I don't know when this is coming out, but if you pre-order before it comes out and go to ofone.co, there's a whole bunch of bonuses that you can get. If you look on iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify, there's a podcast of the same name, Company of One. So there's hopefully by the time the book is out, if you just Google Company of One, I will be the whole front page.
All right.
It's not that way yet, but it'll eventually hopefully be there,
Okay.
be that way.
Awesome. It's a great message. I'm hopeful that more people start realizing they can do this, not putting less pressure on themselves to even the stress of raising money to build a big business or something. You can actually solve meaningful problems in people's lives without killing yourself, and also just making other people happy. It's a cool message. So I'm looking forward to reading it, Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, creativity thrives on constraints, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a bad thing to not have all the hours in the day or all of the money from venture capital.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Cool. All right, Paul. Well, thanks again for taking some time to chat with us. Everybody go check out Company of One on the internet, and look forward to seeing what else comes from you, Paul. Take care.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
So I think some of the key takeaways from talking with Paul for me are that, I loved his notion that he didn't think of himself as a writer, but then you just realized he needed to start writing, and then you'd become a writer. So he's committed lifelong now in that journey of improving his writing by just committing to it. And he thinks of it more like a job. He just shows up and writes. So he's accepted that his first draft might be crap, but in his case, he can have somebody help him edit it. But for him, it's more like he was saying, what I really enjoyed was that we're not inspired and then we write. It's that you write and then you become inspired. And then you just be honest about your ideas and you get them out there. And that whole process is like a journey. So I really appreciate that talk, Paul. Next week, I'm going to be talking with Scott Kuby, who wrote Writing for Designers, which has got kind of like a how-to guide on all the different parts of writing for designers. It's a great take. So I look forward to sharing that. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll keep them going. We'll talk to you next week.